Imagine being the ultimate architect of decay. What actually happens when the destroyer of worlds, well, simply runs out of things to destroy? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're diving into a deeply atmospheric and honestly terrifying story from the codex of a figure known as Baron von Nix. It's called the Parable of the Brocken. We're going to unpack a profound philosophical shift here, moving from active, aggressive unmaking to something far more chilling, encountering a void that simply stops fighting back. So, we rejoin the Baron 1 year after his absolute greatest triumph, and the scene is just set so perfectly. The clock in the bell tower of Weimar did not strike 3, it bled it. You can almost feel that unnatural tension, right? The air carries this sharp, sour scent of vinegar and old parchment. The entire valley below is holding its breath, kind of like someone listening to a floorboard creak in a completely empty house. And we are standing right there with the Baron, on the jagged, freezing peak of the Brocken mountain. But to really get why the heavy silence of this moment matters, we have to flash back and look at what he did here exactly 1 year ago. The Baron enacted what's known as the first sloughing. Now, this wasn't just, physical destruction. It was a total unraveling of reality itself. Wielding immense power, the Baron literally peeled away the skin of the earth like burnt paper. He didn't just burn the world down, he completely stripped it of all its illusions, forcefully dragging reality into the age of nihilistic negation. And the actual process of this unmaking, it was incredibly visceral. As he spoke the final syllable of his dark creed, under the black anti-light of this cold star above them, something grotesque happened. Oily, silver quicksilver literally began oozing straight out of the air, pooling heavily on the frostbitten granite of the mountain. This fluid then twisted upward and solidified. And from that metallic sludge, he birthed his companion, the mercurial spirit of negation. Picture this thing draped in coarse, ash-gray robes, wearing a black leather plague doctor's mask with these totally lifeless glass eyes. This spirit became his grand architect of decay. Now contrast the mountain for a second with his earlier active destruction down in the Great Library of Weimar. Before he even climbed the Brocken, the unmaking down in the city wasn't about fire. It was a terrifying revelation. Look at how absolute this progression was. As that anti-light hit the ancient books, the ink just dissolved entirely into blank white vellum. Think about that. Philosophy completely devolved into mere conjecture. History became nothing more than a rumor. Poetry turned into pure chaotic noise. Literally, within a single hour, every shelf in that massive library held only empty pages. And as the scholars wept over their blank pages, the Baron stood right there amidst the ruined wisdom and delivered this crushing blow. You built a monument to the idea that truth can be stored. He was actively, forcefully dismantling not just their books, but their entire worldview. He really thrived on this confrontation, feeding off the fiery energy of tearing down humanity's deepest convictions. His whole philosophy was built on this cruel certainty. He told those weeping men that truth is just a rumor that passes between two frightened animals in the dark. He basically told them they were now just as literate as they had always been. They simply couldn't hide their illiteracy anymore. He reveled in their resistance. He thrived on breaking their desperate, stubborn belief that meaning actually existed. That was the Baron at his absolute peak, an active, dominant force breaking down a stubbornly resistant world. Okay, which brings us abruptly back to the present moment. 1 year later, the crown of the Brocken. The Baron stands ready, waiting in his pristine Prussian coat, buttoned tightly against a wind that has absolutely no warmth. Above him hangs that exact same cold star casting upward shadows. He raises his iron staff. He is totally ready to perform the second creed, ready to push his negation even deeper into the very fabric of the universe. He opens his mouth to speak, and nothing. The mountain did not respond. Imagine the sheer crushing weight of that pause. He's standing there anticipating a cosmic reaction, a massive tear in reality, some magnificent continuation of his grand unmaking. But instead, he is met with an entirely different, deeply chilling quality of silence. See, the Baron expected active defiance. He expected the mountain to fight back, to armor itself against his philosophy like a soldier arming against an incoming enemy. That is how his negation works, right? It needs to push against something. But the unsettling reality? The mountain simply agreed with him. Completely, finally, all the way down. It's the ultimate dark irony. The Grand Destroyer is essentially out of a job, met with complete, unconditional surrender. Physically, this surrender is totally absolute. The moss? Gone since the first slothing. The rocks? Just gray ash now. The granite has absolutely no illusions left to shed. Think back to those weeping scholars in the great library we talked about earlier. There was a massive clash of ideals there, a really fiery friction of beliefs. But here, the mountain just lies before him like a man after a long, devastating illness. It's not dead, exactly, but cooperatively, exhaustedly empty. It offers absolutely nothing back to push against. So, what is left to negate when the world actually agrees with you? This right here is his quiet terror. Think about it. If your entire identity, your whole reason for being is built on pushing against something, what happens when that resistance just vanishes? The void has simply laid down and waited, basically offering the Baron the very floor of his own argument to stand on. He has won so completely, he has rendered his own existence entirely obsolete. And just when the emptiness seems totally finalized, we get an anomaly. The gray spirit, that mercurial spirit of negation, the Baron's own horrific quicksilver creation, takes a step sideways, off the path, and onto the dead ash. It's as if the literal embodiment of nothingness is inexplicably searching for something that used to be there, almost like it's remembering the feeling of the moss beneath its feet. This is the first crack in his perfect architecture. But notice, it isn't a crack caused by some clever logical argument or a violent clash of magical forces. No, it's a fracture born of something older, deeper, and infinitely more stubborn than his meticulous philosophy of nothingness. The absolute reality he built is beginning to fracture from the inside out. So what exactly broke this unbreakable silence? Left there on the peak before dawn is a small, completely inexplicable mystery. An oil study painting of moss. Right there on the summit of a mountain that had been entirely reduced to cooperative ashen emptiness. I mean, it's completely absurd. Think about how wild that is. A tiny, careful, artistic study of green life resting quietly on a massive monument of gray nothingness. And written on the back of this little painting are just 4 simple words. It was here first. This is the ultimate quiet defiance. The Baron's loud, cosmic negation and all his terrifying creeds absolutely cannot touch the simple, enduring reality that life existed. It's a statement of stubborn permanence that completely bypasses his entire architecture of decay. It doesn't argue with him, it simply states a fact. And this quiet defiance? It ripples outward. We learn a shepherd finds the painting and sells it down into the city, specifically to a woman in Weimar who is, at that exact moment, mixing green paint. The connection here is just beautiful. Weimar is the very city where the Baron violently dissolved all human knowledge into blank vellum. Yet here, life, art, and the color green are quietly reasserting themselves. Life doesn't need to argue with the Baron. It simply goes on. For the Baron, this realization triggers a total psychological collapse. He had reached the edge, and he literally did not know the word for what lay beyond it. For a man entirely defined by his absolute precision and control, encountering an enduring, nameless reality that he cannot unmake is the ultimate terror. He wasn't defeated by some grand army or a hero. He was broken by the quiet, stubborn persistence of existence itself. Which leaves us with a really profound final thought for this explainer. What happens to the architect of negation when he realizes life doesn't argue, but simply outlasts? The Baron conquered the library, sure, he conquered the mountain, but he could not conquer the simple memory of moss. It shows us that sometimes the absolute most powerful resistance isn't a fight at all. It's simply enduring. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the Brocken. Keep pondering those edges, and I'll see you next time.